Good morning, dear students. Today I'll be discussing about the surgical aspects of orthognathic surgery. And I think Dr. Sridhar had discussed about the diagnosis and treatment planning of orthognathic surgical procedures. And I think he would have discussed about the mock surgery, right? Till the mock surgery, I think it would have been done. Anyway, I just want to repeat what is mock surgery. It's nothing but procedure what is done on the patient is done on the model just before doing any surgical procedure on the patient, so that the what is that we have planned in the patient is done beforehand in the model, so that we'll have an idea about the exact procedure how it is done, and we'll make a splint out of it, so that that splint is used in the surgical procedure, and that gives us as a guide as to what is that we have planned in beforehand and what is that we have achieved in the surgery. So preparation of the splint is done in what is called as mock surgery. So exactly what is that is planned in the surgical aspects is done on the model beforehand, so that we can plan or achieve the goal what is that we have planned for the surgical procedures. So what are the different procedures we come across? Because you have a maxillary procedures, you have mandibular surgeries, and sometimes we combine both maxilla and mandible depending upon the discrepancy. So actually by the moment we see the patient, we'll have an idea about, okay, this patient has got a long face or a short face, or patient has got a wide face. And so that we try to analyze and try to take a self tracing, predict the tracing, and we can have an idea about what is that the patient wants. So once we diagnose and plan our treatment, we do a mock surgery, prepare the splint ready before surgical procedure is done on the patient. So to classify, you have your maxillary procedures, you have mandibular procedures, and sometimes we combine both. It's called bijaw surgeries. So what are the classifications done in the maxilla? So you have your Lefort 1 osteotomies, Lefort 2 osteotomies, and anterior maxillary osteotomies. And as you all know that Lefort 1 osteotomy is just like you have Lefort 1 fractures, wherein here it is intentionally done. We are trying to intentionally fracture the maxilla and try to bring the maxilla anteriorly or superiorly or posteriorly, depending upon the need of the patient, so that we plan our surgery. And Lefort 2 and Lefort 3 osteotomies are also done for especially your syndromic patients. And anterior maxillary osteotomy is again segmental osteotomy of the maxilla from premolar to premolar. We try to break the bone, don't fracture the maxilla, and we can try to achieve what is required for the patient. So if it is segmental osteotomies, it is called anterior segmental osteotomy. And if it is a complete maxilla, it's a Lefort 1 osteotomy. So this is what is Lefort 1 fracture. As I told you here, you have your Lefort 1 osteotomy, wherein from the pyriform margin, you have a fracture line coming back towards the zygomatic buttress, going posteriorly towards the pterygoid plates. The same thing is done intentionally on the patient, and try to do both the sides and try to down fracture the whole of the maxilla, and we can try to take the maxilla forward or superiorly based upon the patient's requirement. So history, we all know that in 1927, Wassman is the first person to start with the Lefort osteotomies. Axelson was to advanced maxilla, but Bell is popularized in 1972, wherein the biological basis is through extensive studies, and he found out that it is basically your blood supply, because whatever be the surgical procedure, it all depends on the blood supply to the area. So if that blood supply is compromised, the whole surgery is gone, because the patient will end up with necrosis of the bone. So always we have to be careful while trying to deal such patients, not to injure the vessels there and not to damage the vascular structures, so as that is to be not to be compromised in that area. So that has been popularized by Bell, and he had said that a lot of blood supply to the maxilla, and always try to be careful while dealing with the soft tissues. So you have your indications for Lefort 1 osteotomies. You have your maxillary advancement. You can take the max superiorly or inferiorly, or widening of maxilla, and sometimes to close the open bite. It's called as apatognathia, because usually patient will have a open bite. In such cases, we try to combine both maxilla and mandible and try to close the open bite. Preferably, it is mostly indicated As I told you, one patient with a severe maxillary hyperplasia or mid-face hyperplasia, maxillary hyperplasia or hyperplasia. If a patient has got a long face or a short face, or sometimes correcting the cant of occlusions, and especially patients with cleft patients, wherein patient will land up with maxillary deficiency. So in such cases, we try to take the maxilla forward. So all these areas wherein there's a hyperplasia or a hyperplasia, depending upon the patient's requirement, we try to bring the maxilla either forward or backward. Or if the patient has got a very long face, we try to reduce that long face by taking it superiorly, or trying to, if we want to increase increase the face, we can try to don't fracture the maxilla, bring it down, and bring it down by this, we put a graph between the fracture segments so that we can increase the length of the maxilla. So all these procedures are being done on the patient, and we can try to achieve the results as when is required. So this is what is the surgical procedures. This diagram will show, I told you, once we make incision in the mucogingival junction, reflect the flap, mucoperiosteal flap is raised, we expose the whole of the maxilla anteriorly till your anterior aspect of nasal spine, posterior till the posterior aspect of your buttress. So try to expose the area, reflect the nasal mucosa from the piriform aperture, and try to make a cut from the piriform margin posteriorly. As you can see here, the second picture, where the cut is being made, which is extending posteriorly towards the zygomatic buttress, towards the pterygoid plates. Once we do it on both the sides, we can try to don't fracture the maxilla completely, and we can try to mobilize the maxilla as if you want to increase the length of the maxilla, we try to put a graft there. If you want to shorten the maxilla, we try to cut bone there. And if you want to advance the maxilla, we can bring it forward. This is again the same picture, which has been down fracture segment of the maxilla. We can see here, and the second picture, where we always try to reflect the septum out of the maxilla, or else maxillary bone will not be mobilized. So in such cases, we have to remove the antenasal septum there on the anterior part of the maxilla superiorly. We try to reflect the septum out and try to mobilize the maxilla segment and bring it forward or take it superiorly based upon the requirement. So can you see here, wherein this we can see the don't fractured maxillary segment, and the second picture. Usually, I told you there's a greater Palton vessel there posteriorly. We have to be careful not to damage the structure, but sometimes we come across along with fracture segment. If there's a bleeding, we can always try to cauterize it also. But always, I told you, not to damage the vascular structures, because the compromised blood supply should not be a hindrance to your surgery. And once you bring the maxilla, once you plan your treatment, as I told you, we prepare a splint. We have a splint there, which is done in mock surgery on the models, and that splint is used now in the patient to exactly know that we have brought the maxilla forward or superiorly, depending upon the patient's requirement. And then once it is done, the splint gives us a guide. So we put it onto the teeth. We exactly know what is that we have achieved in the patient. And once you confirm that result, we try to fix the maxilla by using your mini plates. And always, if there is any maxillary procedure for that matter, patient will end up with a flaring of the alar width, that is a flaring of the alar base, wherein the nasal bone, that is after, because we try to take the maxilla up, and once we strip the nasal periosteum, your patient will end up with a flattened or a alar base widening, and that can be reduced by doing what is called as cinching procedure. It's called alar cinch, C-I-N-C-H. So that has been done by taking a bite from the muzzle from the nose, that is from the inner aspect, and that is sutured to the antenasal spine. This is what has been shown the second picture, where there's a suturing taking place from the muzzle by taking bite from the nasalis muscle, and it is sutured to the antenasal spine. So by doing this alar cinching, the alar base widening is reduced, so patient will have a normal nose, or else a patient will have a very flared up nose. So that can be prevented by doing what is called as alar cinch procedures. Always in all maxillary procedures, being your segmental osteotomies or your left foot osteotomies, we have to do alar cinch, so to prevent the alar base widening. This is again a simple representation on the skull showing you the exact treatment, that is bone cuts made on the maxilla for your left foot osteotomies. This is how it is done. And this is what is done on the patient. And we try to fracture the maxilla on bilateral side, both sides. We can down fracture the maxilla and bring the maxilla either anteriorly, superiorly, or posteriorly, depending upon the requirement. These are all the pictures which has been done in the college, where this patient had a long face. You can see the incisal shows on the patient. So after doing a superior repositioning of the maxilla, and this was the post-operative picture of the same patient. We have taken the maxilla up by almost 6 to 8 millimeters, and her incisal show is not seen now. Again, she is a sister from the nursing institute. And she had, again, we had to combine both maxillary superior portion and some involving the lower also. We did both surgeries for the maxilla and the mandible. And we had taken the maxillary superiorly. And this is the pre and the post-operative picture. Again, same thing with the same in the other patient, where it's a pre-op and post-op, taking the maxilla superiorly and slightly set back the maxilla. So this is a procedure of the maxilla, and always any surgery will be followed by some of the complications which you can come across. Usually you have your infraorbital nerve traction injury, because we are trying to reflect the cheek muscle and the cheek mucosa, so that you have your infraorbital nerve, which can be sort of land up with slightly paresthesia of the infraorbital region. So there will be obviously an infraorbital nerve traction taking place, and the patient will land up with some sort of paresthesia, which gets corrected by a couple of months. And sometimes while trying to make a fracture, patient will end up with unanticipated fractures. So you have to be very careful while trying to deal such areas. You have to exactly make a cut and not use an inadvertent force, and which can cause fractures to the other areas. And always you have to be careful. I told you the blood supply, you have to be very careful not to damage any vessels there, and especially your maxillary or your posterior catapultine vessels. So not to damage the structure. As I told you, if you damage any vascular bundles, the patient will end up with necrosis, and that can lead to a lot of problems. And one few of the rare cases are lacrimal duct injuries, because we are trying to cut in the nasal area. And the patient, I told you, if you're not careful about your blood supply, the whole of the maxilla undergoes necrosis. It's called avascular necrosis, and that will be a troublesome to the patient and to us also. You have your nasal septal deviation and buckling, because as you take the maxilla superiorly, I think I shown you a last picture wherein the septum is being released. So in such cases, we have to slightly remove the septum so that the buckling is prevented, so that the nasal septal deviation is also being prevented. And the flaring of LR base, which we have discussed, wherein the LR base widening takes place in all your maxillary procedures, be your left one or your segmental, and that can be prevented by doing what is called as LR cinch procedure, which I had already discussed before. So that is about the left one osteotomies. You have your anterior maxillary osteotomies, that is surgery done from the premolar region to premolar on the opposite side. So we extract the premolars on both the sides, and we make a vertical cut on the extracted socket superiorly, and we join with the lateral cut towards the piriform margin, which I'll be discussing shortly. And there are different incisions. Usually we do a buccal incision or transpalatal incisions, which I'll be discussing now. Indications, as I told you, where there is sometimes the patient will end up a severe procrustation of upper anterior teeth, and it is only almost anteriorly placed. In such cases, we can do what is called as anterior maxillary osteotomies, and there is a marked protrusion of maxillary teeth. We can try to reduce that. Patients with sometimes, I told you, in open bites, we have to do combination of both maxillary procedures and mandibular procedures to correct these open bites. And other patients, wherein patient with resorption or ankylosis of the tooth, if there is no movement taking place, we try to go above and make a cut in the bone, try to move. But it is not usually advisable. We don't do that regularly, right? This is the Wanderers procedure, which there are three procedures. You have your Wasman's, Wanderers, and Cooper's modification. So we have this is a Wanderers procedure, which is obsolete now. Nobody does this because what the problem with this approach is, he had made a cut in the transpalatal approach. It's called transpalatal incision made on the palatal aspect of the maxilla, and he had made a cut from the palatal bone towards the buccal side. And the problem was it was almost like a blind approach, and the palatal blood supply is lost. There was a lot of complications related to that. So now that is been obsolete, nobody does this procedure. But for your exam point of view, you should know these three procedures. You have your Wassermann, Wanderer, and Cooper's modification, which is discussed. So Wanderers is always a transpalatal approach. So nobody does that normally. And what we commonly do is a Wassermann approach, which is a Cooper modification, wherein he has not touched anything on the palate. He has not made any incision on the palatal side. It is on the buccal side, exactly on the teeth, on the area of the tooth extracted, especially a premolars. You make incision vertically on the premolar on one side, both sides, and try to reflect the flap there and try to reach towards the piriform margin. Again, this was not so much of pressure and lot of traction was required, so we don't have to be a lot of tearing of tissues. So that was prevented by Cooper's modification, and where we can make an incision exactly like how we did in the Lefort osteotomies. You make incision on the mucogingival fold or mucogingival junction and try to make incision, reflect the flap there, and which I'll be showing to you. So here Wassermann does a buccal approach where he has not touched made any palatal incision on the palatal side, and he has used a periosteal elevator on the palatal side to reflect the mucoperiosteum on the palatal aspect, but no incision is made on the palatal side. It's only on the buccal side. This is by Cooper's. I told you it's modified modified with Wassermann, wherein he has not used any again the palatal cuts. It's only on the buccal side. And advantage being, we can directly access the nasal structures or direct vision of the bone, and there's no palatal cut, and placement of your plates is easy. This is what is done on the patient. You have your anterior segmental osteotomies. As I told you, you extract the tooth of the premolar region. Excuse me. On the extreme, sorry, on the premolar, and we make a cut vertically up towards the towards the piriform length of the height of the piriform, and laterally making cut from the piriform margin joining the extracted socket. So that do it on the both sides, and we can down fracture the anterior maxilla and try to take it superiorly or anteriorly based upon the requirement. This is called as Cooper's modification of Wassermann's, where you can try to mobilize the anterior maxilla. This is what I told you. The same incision is given as your Lefort osteotomies on the mucogingival junction. Make an incision, reflect the mucoperiosteal flap, expose the maxilla till your premolar region, right? You can reflect the nasal mucosa and start making a cut from the piriform margin towards the extracted socket. That is, make a cut laterally towards the level of the premolar region, and then come down vertically towards the extracted socket, and then try to do it on both sides, and only that anterior segment of maxilla is down fractured. So you can see here, we have made a cut on the first picture vertically down towards the extracted socket, and once it is, what is that we have achieved? I told you, you can use your splint here again and try to give you a picture about what is that we have done in mock surgery, and try to fix it up there. And we can always fix using your mini plates once you achieve what is required. Again, the same modifications, Epcus is similar to the discovered by Cooper, and the sequence of bone cuts, you don't have to worry much about it. If you can write down about your Cooper modification and preservation of your palatal side, that itself is well and good. Again, these are the anterior maxillary osteotomies done in the college. This again, she was a sister nurse in medical college, where she had a severe proclination of upper anterior teeth. In such cases, we did a anterior maxillary osteotomy, and this is what has been achieved on this intraoperative picture, and this is the postoperative picture of the patient. And it is preoperative and the postoperative picture of the patient. Right? Same thing in the for both, we had to do both the anti-maxillary osteotomy in the anterior and when we in the mandible also, so combining both maxilla and mandible, and this is what is achieved on the. This is again the sister again in the Yale College. So we had to do both anterior maxillary and anterior mandible also. Right. This is what is maxilla and in the mandible. Same procedure is done. It's called as anterior mandibular subapical osteotomy, and always once that is what is like we plan as per surgical planning. Once that is achieved, we fix it with your mini plates on both maxilla and the mandible. You have what is called as posterior maxillary osteotomy. That is again only on the posterior aspect. Is also called as Schuhart's technique in 1959, where it is used, especially indicated in where if there is a posterior maxillary hyperplasia or if there is any transverse discrepancies or any posterior open bite or spacing indentation. In such cases, we do only on the posterior maxilla. We can same thing. What is done anteriorly is done on the posterior aspect, and we can don't fracture the posterior aspect and try to achieve that. I'll show you how it is done. Same thing again, I told you, make incision on the mucogingival fold. We make if you want to use only the from the premolar to the tuberosity, to the third molar, we make a cut again, as in the picture shown here. We can make a cut, vertical cut or superiorly till your zygomatic buttress, below just zygomatic buttress, and then go laterally behind towards the tuberosity, and you can down fracture that segment, which I think you can show you that picture. Yeah, this is, and if sometimes if required, we try to make a palatal incision on the palatal spine on one side, right? Or we make a Y incision on one side so that we can try to make a cut on the palatal bone and try to achieve the down fracturing of the posterior maxillary segment. This is what is, so in the second picture I can show you, where after extracting the tooth socket of premolar, from there till the tuberosity, we extend it superiorly, posteriorly down towards the tuberosity. We can down fracture that segment. And if there's no posterior open bite or if there is any hyperplasia of that part of the posterior segment, we can always try to correct that by bringing it down or bringing it anteriorly or taking it superiorly and try to close the space, whatever is. You can see here there's a posterior open bite that can be reduced by doing what is called as posterior segmental osteotomy or a Schuhart's technique. So what are the complications of any segmental osteotomy? So as I told you, always damage to soft tissues. Always I told you, respect the soft tissues, and the soft tissues respects you by better healing. So always be careful not to damage the soft tissues. The blood supply has to be maintained well, and always, or else the patient will end up with necrosis of the bone. So to prevent that, you have to be very careful while handling your soft tissues not to damage the blood supply. And sometimes we might damage the adjacent teeth, causing some periodontal pockets, which is not much of a severe thing, but we have to be careful not to damage the adjacent structures. And wherever bone contact is not satisfactory, patient will end up with delayed unions, but that also is not of a major issue, but we try to approximate the bones all together and try to prevent further delay in healing. So that can be rectified while doing your procedure. Single tooth osteotomies, like I told you, it's a single tooth corticotomies. It is done in the anterior maxilla, wherein we try to make a cut for each individual tooth, which is not usually done now. It is obsolete, but people have tried it out for doing a single tooth corticotomy by going between the two teeth and trying to fix it up using a splint in the after correction. But it is usually done in the closure of diastemas or patient with the dental ankylosis. We try to make a cut above the epicenter of the tooth and try to mobilize the whole tooth structures. But it is not of much use now. We don't commonly follow this. And there are a few advantages and disadvantages of your single tooth corticotomy. But the problem always, we have to be careful not to damage adjacent tooth. We have to be careful not to devitalize the tooth. All those special people end up with color change or resorption of the roots. That is to be prevented, yes, preferably. And but the advantage being the time taken, you don't have to go major surgery, not much of a issue. But the tendency and the lower incidence of relapse taking place with your compared with your conventional orthodontic therapy. I told you this is the picture of what has been done. If you want to bring it down or taking up of a single tooth, but we have to be careful not to damage the adjacent tooth. especially the roots of adjacent tooth. LeFor-2, and this is again what we have a LeFor-2 fractures. So you intentionally do it on the patient, but it's called LeFor-2 osteotomies and LeFor-3 osteotomies. This is called LeFor-2 osteotomy, called by Henderson and Jackson as nasomaxillary hypoplasia. And always, most of the times, it is indicated if it is involved with cleft palates or pan-facial problems or post-traumatic cases. Sometimes we have to do a nasomaxillary disjunction and try to bring the maxilla forward and behind. But it is for the theoretical point of view, not for your, at least for the final years. I don't think nobody will be asking about LeFor-2 osteotomies. So for the benefit of postgraduates, it is a Kufner's procedure. It was a lot of modifications taking place, and is usually indicated for a severe maxillary deficiency that involves the intraorbital rim and the zygomas, and it's called as the quadrangular LeFor-2 osteotomies. And LeFor-3 is, again, I told you, it is done mostly in the syndromic patients, where the patient with severe midface deficiencies involving both nasal and zygomatic bones. In such cases, the whole of the anterior maxilla, that is your nasomaxillary complex, is disjunction, and we can try to bring it forward, especially in syndromic patients. But again, it is usually commonly done with help, along with the help of the neurosurgeons. It's a combined team approach, but what we have not done it, or it is just for the for the completion's sake, we have to explain about this. But preferably, you have to understand what is LeFor-1, your anterosegmental, at least for the final years. So again, I told you, this is all for the syndromic patients, LeFor-3 osteotomy. And this was popularized by Paul Tessier, start by Harold Gillies. I told you in syndromic, in a lot of syndromic patients, they try to do a nasomaxillary disjunction and try to bring the midface forward, especially visually, because syndromic patients will end up with hypoplasia. So there will be a lot of syndromic synostosis. So we have to fracture that area intentionally and try to bring it forward. I think that I'll stop with this class today. I think next class I'll start with the mandibular osteotomies. Okay, if you have any doubt, please let me know. We can always discuss later. Thank you.